Welcome back to the Real News Network and our series of interviews with Tom Ferguson. We're talking about the economic crisis and the plans of President Obama. Thanks, Tom. So Barack Obama talked about fixing the fundamental structural problem of a bubble and bust economy. But certainly one of the underlying structural issues in that is the lack of real purchasing power. And these certain bubbles are created in different ways. The last bubble was created through all this debt infusion into the housing market. But the reason there's people susceptible to this debt infusion is because they don't have real purchasing power. And so much of the economy has been fueled by debt, by credit cards. The question of wages and real purchasing power, if that isn't addressed, is there a structural solution here?
One has to say that the short-term problems are so immense, it's maybe not surprising he hasn't done much about it, but there's some fairly scary things going on. When you actually look at what the administration was doing, you will see that the same person who does the thinking, I'm now speaking of Larry Summers and to some extent Geithner, who does the thinking on the financial crisis, is also in charge of the auto talks. And they did something pretty interesting a week or so ago that seems to me to foretell a problem. The auto parts industry has been asking for credit because, I mean, you got a problem. Since you got the firms that they do business with are going down the tubes, they got a problem getting paid for stuff. They wanted credit. They asked the government for, I think, around 19 billion or so, 18 or 19 billion. And you might assume they really didn't expect to get that, so maybe they thought they might get 8, 10. They got 5. And the point a lot of analysts noted was this means that a lot of these guys are going to go out of business. And that's
just to be clear, these are auto parts manufacturers.
Yeah. What that tells you is that Summers and Geithner are still thinking that the comparative advantage of the United States lies in what you might call the traditional Cambridge thought on this, Cambridge Mass thought on this, which is finance, the media, high technology. And you got to have a wider view than that. And, if they have it, I haven't seen signs of it. I mean, it's fine to do green jobs. I have no doubt that you can build a substantial employment bases there, though, that's not going to happen until you put a floor on energy prices. You're going to have to tell folks for sure that, you can plan on, say, $40 a barrel as a domestic oil price or something, at least not less than that, so that you can actually make the commitments. And it's not going to happen until you do that. Otherwise you can just pour a small amount. You can pour actually large amounts of cash into that, but it won't get built when the cash runs out. I haven't seen anything. I was skeptical for the Standard Line. I know many people. I've co-authored papers with some of them. The Standard Line of folks, often in sort of high economics, has been you don't have to worry about exchange rates. It's really just a problem of an investment and savings. And I never thought that was true. And my sense is that they have not really addressed the problem. What are they going to do about exchange rate misalignment, which ultimately pushed a lot of American manufacturing right out the door. And I think
break that down. What does that mean?
Well, it means that, look, it's no secret the Chinese were all encouraged to peg their currency to the dollar and peg it make it very attractive for Americans to buy there and not produce here. My sense is they should have moved on that exchange rate adjustment long ago. It was very attractive. When you study closely what Rubin and company were doing under Clinton and then Paulson under Bush, what you'll discover is their main interest in China was how can they get U.S. financial firms into China to deal financial assets. They weren't interested in exchange rate misalignment and such problem. In fact, they typically denied it existed and tried very hard to pretend it didn't exist. Even now, the administration's approach on the famous Buy American controversy, I think, was something of the thinking on that was frankly just not very clear. Allow me to be blunt. There's no question that you're much better off with free trade and a world economy at full employment. I mean, and the notion that you should just do beggar your neighbor policies of effectively just exporting your unemployment with a tariff or something like that is indeed, that's suboptimal. They're right on that. On the other hand, to pursue the policies they've embarked on, which is effectively reflation in one country, it's big economic stimulus in one country, is not going to work. I mean, effectively what you'll do is suck in imports at a very high rate in the U.S., and you may develop some balance of payments problems unless that's counterbalanced by sort of a capital inflow from, say, a rise in the stock market or something like that. And my take on this whole Buy American thing was there was no reason to do Buy American in general, but I would have made it conditional for other countries. They had to join in the stimulus. I mean, otherwise you just preach to the Germans, who will, tell you Buy American is internationally wrong and don't stimulate, so that they in effect export in the United States and don't do any reciprocal buying. That's crazy. I mean, and they should have been put on notice that that's unviable. I mean, this is effectively, this point's really crucial, because the administration, along with most American multinationals, does not want to go there, because that disrupts the transnational production schemes, or potentially, of the multinationals. That's the real issue here. On the other hand, you look at how, you got to this point in 1933 as Roosevelt came into office, and it was clear that the multinational solution would not work. And the London conference fell apart. That's the equivalent of the G20 summit, or just about to have. And so Roosevelt essentially just devalued the dollar and did his own reflation program with tariffs, with the tariffs were built into the National Recovery Act, all that stuff. And then later he turned around and turned into the world's most famous and leading internationalist. I mean, they did the whole tripartite money agreement, the big move toward free trade. That was after they'd done domestic stabilization. My sense here is that there's a deep internal contradiction in what the administration is trying to do, which is quite correctly reflate in the United States. But if the U.S. reflates and the rest of the world doesn't, that's a formula for disaster. And, it means a year and a half or so from now, they're going to be faced with some fairly big problems, including a lot of the cash you're spending here just goes out the door and doesn't come back. My sense is they should deal with that right up front early on now and push toward a multilateral solution. I'm not advocating that they exclude foreign goods or...
So this you think is going to be the issue at the G20?
It should have been. It wasn't. Instead, they're relying on moral exhortation. They're telling these guys, you should stimulate, and Angela Merkel and now even Nicolas Sarkozy are having none of it. They're just saying no, as plain. And I read German, and I look at the German papers all the time.
Why are they saying no?
They claim they've done enough stimulus. That seems to me to be nonsense. In the German case, I think the story is very clear. The Germans realize that as long as the whole EU doesn't break down in the current conditions, German companies will end up buying everything in Europe. Because they're much stronger competitors than the rest of those firms.
So this deflation
is in their interest, and there has been a long-standing, it is true, that a big block of the folks who pushed the European Union have always thought, well, we could turn Europe into a financial center like the U.S., and so they're happy to deflate their own population. The European Central Bank has been the main sort of thing sitting on the world recovery in Europe for a very long time. And it actually predates Mr. Trichet's introduction there.
Okay, next segment of our interview, I want to focus on wages.
Okay.
And how important is it that wages go up?
Yeah.
Please join us in the next segment of our interview with Tom Ferguson. There are times when reality just asserts itself, in spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment. Sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households were receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have a $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news. But there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching the real news every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.